I never thought my daughter could turn on me. She was the child I sacrificed everything for, the one I woke up every day for, the one I worked endlessly to provide for. But that day, when I walked into the courtroom, I realized how far she had gone. Dawn, my only daughter, rolled her eyes and whispered something dismissive to her husband Dave. But then something extraordinary happened. The judge looked up, paused for a moment, and said, "It's her." The courtroom fell silent. They had no idea who I was. I had spent 69 years as a simple grandmother, a woman who woke up at 6 a.m. to make coffee in the same chipped mug for 20 years, watered the African violets my late husband had loved, and lived a quiet, predictable life. For 45 years, I worked nights cleaning offices, sold homemade cupcakes on weekends, and sewed clothes just to provide my daughter Dawn the life I never had. All my sacrifices, all my love had gone unnoticed by the one person I did it all for. Dawn married Dave, a man who never said a kind word to me, but I swallowed my pride and welcomed them into my home week after week. I believed after my husband passed away that Dawn and I would grow closer, but instead, her visits became fewer and colder. She saw me as a burden, and it reached its peak one October afternoon when she and Dave came to my house, and I served the chicken and dumplings she had always loved. The ones I'd slaved over for hours. Dave sat down as if he owned the place, plopping into my husband's armchair and turning on the television. Dawn, dressed in a green dress I'd bought her, didn't even smile. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice colder than ever. I had no idea what was coming. She and Dave had made a decision. "This house is too big for you. You can't maintain it. We found a retirement community for you," she said without a trace of hesitation. The floor seemed to fall out beneath me. This house, where Dawn had taken her first steps, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where my husband had died, was no longer mine. "But Dawn, this is our home. All our memories are here," I pleaded, my voice shaking. Her response was chilling. "Memories are in the heart, Mom, not on the walls. It's what's best for you." Dave, ever the opportunist, just smiled, agreeing with her coldly. "It's for the best, Mrs. Maeve," he said. "Don't worry about the paperwork. We'll handle it." That night, after they left, I sat alone, my heart breaking, looking at the pictures of Dawn as a child, a teenager, a graduate. How had it come to this? How had my daughter, the girl I once thought of as my hero, become so heartless? Days passed in a blur. Dave brought in a real estate appraiser to measure the house, listing all the flaws, talking about renovations, like they were talking about a house they were buying. Dawn stood beside him, nodding at every criticism of my home. They were stripping me of my dignity, taking away my memories, one cruel comment at a time. The worst came when Dawn brought home brochures for the retirement community. "It has bingo on Tuesdays and a nurse on duty 24/7, she said in that voice, that same tone she used to convince me when she was younger to give her money for candy. "You'll be safer there." Safe. It was a word that didn't belong in the same sentence as my daughter's treatment of me. I had lived in this house for 30 years. I knew my neighbors had my routines and my plants, but none of that mattered to Dawn. It was as if I didn't exist anymore, just an inconvenience in the way of her future with Dave. When they returned with legal papers, I knew something was wrong. "Mrs. Maeve, the lawyer, said we just need your signature for the transfer of the property." My hands shook as I processed what they were asking. "Transfer?" I repeated. I thought they were going to sell the house, but they weren't. They were taking it. They wanted ownership of my home, my legacy. "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly, my heart pounding. Dave, his face now a mask of anger, stood up. "Ma'am, you're no longer in a condition to make decisions. Dawn is your only heir. She's acting in your best interest." This is my house. I yelled the words escaping me in a burst of raw emotion. And I'm not leaving. Dawn's face tightened. Mom, please don't make this harder. You know you can't take care of yourself. It was a lie. A cruel, manipulative lie. But the damage was done. I was trapped. They had planned this from the start. Give me time, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You have 1 week, Dave said coldly. Then we'll do what we have to do. As they left, I collapsed into my husband's chair. The house felt empty, like the walls were closing in. I couldn't fight anymore. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old, too weak, too invisible to fight back. But that night, something inside me shifted. A small spark of defiance ignited. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. Not without a fight. The next day, as I sat in my kitchen surrounded by memories, I made a decision. I would not let them strip me of my dignity, my home, or my legacy. For the first time in a long while, I felt something stronger than sadness or defeat. I felt power. That afternoon, Dawn returned alone. She came into the kitchen with a stack of boxes. Mom, I'm here to help you pack, she said, her voice still robotic, as though everything was already settled. Dawn, please don't do this, I said, my voice trembling but my resolve growing stronger. This house is all I have left. It's all we have left. She barely looked at me as she began gathering my belongings, treating my life's memories as if they were nothing more than old junk. She picked up my wedding china, the tablecloths I'd embroidered through sleepless nights, the books my husband had given me, and shoved them all carelessly into boxes. This dress is so old, Mom. You don't need it anymore, she said, holding up the dress I'd worn to my husband's funeral. Leave it, I begged, my heart aching, but she had already tossed it into a donation bag. My heart broke a little more with each item she packed. When she found my jewelry box, that was the final straw. My wedding ring, the anniversary earrings my husband had gifted me, a gold chain that had belonged to my mother. She put it all into her purse. This will be safer in a safe deposit box, she said, as if it wasn't mine to keep. Those are mine, I cried, trying to grab her purse, but she pulled it away. Mom, you're getting upset, she said with a sickening calmness. This is why you can't live alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was taking everything from me, and she had no remorse. No consideration for the woman who had spent her entire life making sure she had everything she needed. When Dawn left, taking my memories, my dignity, and my jewelry, I was left in the half-empty house, feeling more alone than I had ever felt before. The silence of the empty rooms was suffocating. How had it come to this? My daughter, the one I raised with love and sacrifice, had become a stranger. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. Dave came every morning supervising the process like I was incapable of doing it myself. The house that had been my home for 30 years was being dismantled piece by piece. He brought in strangers who took pictures and measurements, discussing renovations as if I weren't even there. But I had learned one thing: I was not helpless. I had been forced to listen to them, to play the part of the frail, helpless widow, but I wasn't. I found something in my husband's desk that changed everything. While packing, I came across an old folder marked with his initials. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, documents that would change my life. As I opened the folder, I found my husband's will, a new one he had written 6 months before his death. The will was clear. I was the sole heir to everything. Dawn would only receive a small sum if she took care of me in my final years. The most shocking part: my husband had secretly built an empire. He had invested in property, stocks, and even owned shares in the company where Dave worked. The house, the building Dave and Dawn thought they owned, was mine. Everything had been meticulously planned, and I had been living in the dark. I read through every document, properties, investments, bank accounts. It was all there, organized and legal. My husband had protected me even after his death. And then there was the letter, written by him just for me. My dearest Maeve, if you're reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Please forgive me for not telling you sooner, but I wanted this to be a surprise for your golden years. You always sacrifice so much for me and for Dawn, and I wanted to make sure you never wanted for anything. But most of all, I want you to protect yourself. If Dawn ever treats you badly, you now have the power to defend yourself. You are not alone. With love, your husband. I sat in the quiet of my living room, surrounded by the documents, the truth crashing over me like a tidal wave. My husband had seen everything. He had known what was coming. And now I had the power to protect myself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair, sipping tea, planning, calculating. It was time to stop playing the victim. It was time to take control. I wasn't going to let them strip me of everything. Not my home, not my legacy, and certainly not my dignity. The next morning, when Dawn came back, I was ready. She thought she was coming to pack the rest of my things to finish what she and Dave had started. But I had something to show her. When she walked into the living room, I was sitting calmly in my favorite chair, holding the documents that would change everything. Mom, she said with that same coldness in her voice, are you packed yet? I looked at her with steady eyes, knowing the moment had come. I'm not leaving, I said, my voice firm. Dawn's face faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Mom, you have to understand. We already talked about this. The movers are here. The movers can leave, I replied calmly. Nothing is being moved today. She stared at me, confusion and frustration in her eyes. What are you talking about? I stood up slowly, holding the papers in my hands. You've been so sure of your plans, but here's something you didn't know. I handed her the documents, watching her face as she read through them. She stumbled back, eyes wide in disbelief. This can't be real. It's real, I said softly, savoring the moment of power that I had so long been denied. And now, I'm not the one who's leaving. The silence in the room was suffocating as Dawn stood, frozen, the documents clutched in her trembling hands. I watched her shock giving way to panic. She glanced at the papers, back at me, and then to the door as if searching for a way out. Dave had no idea what was coming. Neither did Dawn. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control again. My heart, which had been shattered by her betrayal, now beat with purpose. I wasn't the helpless, forgotten woman they thought I was. I had a lifetime of memories, sacrifices, and a plan that had been set in motion long before they decided to tear me down. Dawn's voice trembled as she spoke. What is this? How could you keep all of this from me? You never said anything about any of this. Her words were laced with anger and confusion, but I saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't for me to tell you, I said, my voice steady. Your father knew what was coming, and so did I. We've both been protecting you from the truth, but now you need to face it. She glanced at Dave, who was standing at the doorway, his face ashen. He had been quiet since I handed Dawn the papers, his usual arrogance gone. This time, it was me who had the upper hand. Mom, this isn't fair, Dawn whispered, her tears welling up. I didn't know any of this. Dave convinced me this was the only way. I thought I was doing what was best for you. I was trying to make things easier for you, for all of us. You were trying to make things easier for you, I said, my voice sharp. For you and him. This was never about me. This was about you taking everything, my home, my memories, my life, and handing it over to him. Dawn fell silent, her eyes downcast. Dave took a step forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Mrs. Maeve," he said, his voice strained. "We can talk about this. We can work things out. You're not thinking clearly. This is all a mistake." I stood up, slowly meeting his gaze with a calmness that unnerved him. "A mistake. You've been planning this for months, Dave. Don't pretend this was all a misunderstanding. I've seen how you've manipulated my daughter, how you've tried to take everything from me. It's over." Dawn stepped back, her hand over her mouth as she processed my words. The tears rolled down her cheeks, but I couldn't let my emotions get in the way now. She had to understand the magnitude of what she had done, what they had done together. "I've been nothing but patient with you, Dawn. I've given everything to make sure you had a better life, to protect you from this kind of manipulation. And this is how you repay me." I didn't raise my voice, but the weight of my words struck her hard. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know. I didn't know what he was doing to me. I've been blind, and I let him twist everything I thought I knew." The remorse in her voice was genuine, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I had been hurt too deeply. I had been humiliated, betrayed by the one person I thought I could trust. It wasn't a simple apology that would fix everything. It would take time. "Sorry isn't enough, Dawn," I said quietly. "You've done things you can't take back. You've hurt me in ways I can't just forget. But you're not the only one who's been manipulated here. I've spent years protecting you, but now it's time to protect myself." Dave was becoming more agitated by the second. He was used to having control, used to seeing me cower, used to having everything go his way. But now, I wasn't afraid of him. I had no reason to fear him anymore. "I think it's time for you to leave, Dave," I said firmly. "You're not welcome here. Not now, not ever." He took a step toward me, his face turning red with rage. "You're making a mistake, Maeve. You can't do this. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," I replied, my voice unwavering. "And it's you who's going to regret underestimating me." I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was thinking of ways to manipulate the situation in his favor, of how he could twist the truth. But for once, he was powerless. I turned to Dawn, who had been silently watching the exchange, tears streaming down her face. "I want you to leave, Dave. You and Dawn both need to leave." Dawn looked up at me, the pain in her eyes still raw. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. But please don't do this. Don't kick him out. I can't do this alone." "Then it's time you learned how to stand on your own," I said softly but firmly. "You've spent your entire life relying on him. It's time for you to stand up for yourself. You deserve more than this." Dave opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I grabbed my phone and called the building manager. "I need you to come up to my apartment. I have a situation here that needs handling." The look on Dave's face when the manager arrived and confirmed that the building belonged to me was priceless. He tried to argue, but the truth had already been established. I wasn't the helpless woman he thought I was. The next few days were tense, filled with paperwork, phone calls to lawyers, and countless emotions. Dawn left the house, but not without a promise to return and work things out. As much as I wanted to hate her, I knew that the road to healing wasn't through anger, but through understanding. She had to make amends, but I couldn't do that for her. I knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And the trial, the one that had brought all the darkness to light, would soon be upon us. The days leading up to the trial were an emotional roller coaster. I spent hours reviewing documents, gathering evidence, and speaking with my lawyer, Victoria. As the date approached, I tried to stay focused, but the pain of what had happened to my family lingered gnawing at my every thought. I still couldn't fully wrap my mind around the betrayal Dawn, my only daughter, had turned against me. And Dave, a man I had once tried to welcome into my family, had been the mastermind behind it all. The trial day arrived with an unsettling weight in the air. It was early in the morning when Dawn and I walked into the courthouse together. She looked nervous, her hand fidgeting with the strap of her purse, her eyes swollen from nights of restless sleep. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for her, even after everything she had done. She was pregnant, vulnerable, and torn between two worlds, one where she was trying to make up for her mistakes, and one where Dave had manipulated her into believing he was her only choice. We sat in the courtroom waiting for the trial to begin. I wore my best black suit, the one that always made me feel confident. But as I sat there, the anxiety began to build up in my chest. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my dignity, for the woman I had always been before all of this, the woman who had sacrificed everything for her family. When Dave walked in with his lawyer, I could feel the tension rise. He had a smug look on his face, as though he thought this trial was already won. But he didn't know what I had up my sleeve. The evidence I had gathered, the truth that was about to come out, it was more than he could ever imagine. The trial started, and Dave's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of me as a manipulative, controlling woman who had used her wealth to drive a wedge between Dawn and her husband. They tried to claim that I had coerced Dawn into cutting ties with Dave, that I had deliberately turned her against him. But Victoria, my lawyer, was ready. She stood up with grace and confidence, countering every lie with undeniable evidence, text messages from Dave threatening to leave Dawn if she didn't follow his demands, recordings of him insulting me and belittling Dawn, testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the emotional abuse he had inflicted. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, my knees shaking, but I refused to let fear take hold of me. I spoke clearly with purpose, recounting everything that had happened, from the moment Dave first entered our lives to the day they tried to force me out of my own home. I didn't hold back. The truth had to come out. I explained how Dave had manipulated Dawn, how he had used her insecurities against her, and how he had tried to take everything from me, my home, my legacy, and my dignity. And then something unexpected happened. The judge, a man I didn't recognize at first, looked up from his notes and paused. He studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if something clicked in his mind. "Mrs. Maeve Williams," he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, feeling a chill run down my spine. The judge took off his glasses and stared at me with recognition. "Did you work at the family court 30 years ago?" he asked. My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, surprised. "I was a secretary for Judge Miller." A smile tugged at the judge's lips, and he leaned forward. "I remember you," he said. "You helped me when I was an intern. You taught me how to organize files. You even brought me coffee when I worked late. You were always kind to me when everyone else treated me like I was invisible." The entire courtroom fell silent. Dawn looked at me in shock, her mouth falling open. Dave, on the other hand, turned pale. He had no idea what was happening. The judge smiled warmly, and I felt my heart tighten with emotion. "I never forgot your kindness, Mrs. Maeve. You told me that one day I would be a great judge when I didn't even believe in myself." The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just any judge. This was David Morales, the young intern I had mentored all those years ago. The one I had encouraged, the one I had helped find his way. Now he was the very judge overseeing my case. Dave's lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, this constitutes a conflict of interest. We request that you recuse yourself from this case." "There is no conflict," Judge Morales replied firmly. "There is only justice." With that, the case took a dramatic turn. The judge listened intently as Victoria presented our evidence, undeniable proof of Dave's manipulations and threats, and the emotional abuse he had inflicted on Dawn. The judge's verdict was swift and final. Dave lost all rights to the baby, and his parental alienation claim was dismissed. He was ordered to pay legal costs and a settlement for emotional damages. Dawn was granted full control over her life and the choice of where she wanted to live. I couldn't believe it. The courtroom that had once felt like a battleground had turned in my favor. I had fought for my dignity, and I had won. When the trial was over, Dawn and I stood outside the courthouse, the weight of the past few months finally beginning to lift. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I don't know how to thank you for everything. I'm so sorry for what I did. I was so blinded by Dave that I didn't see what was right in front of me." I held her close, feeling the warmth of her embrace. "I forgive you, Dawn," I whispered. "But it's going to take time to rebuild what we had." "I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm willing to do whatever it takes." We stood there for a while in silence before heading home. As we walked together, I realized that this wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for both of us. Dawn had learned to see the truth, and I had learned that standing up for yourself was the only way to find peace. The weeks following the trial were a time of healing, but also one of uncertainty. Dawn moved back in with me, but it wasn't easy. We had a lot of conversations, some difficult, some heartbreaking. The months of manipulation had taken their toll, and though I could see the change in her, the damage was not something that could be repaired overnight. She began to show genuine remorse, taking responsibility for the things she had done, for the way she had treated me. It wasn't just about what she had done with Dave. It was about the years of emotional distance she had put between us, the years she had believed the lies instead of trusting me, her mother. Every day she worked to prove that she was changing. Little things at first, helping around the house, not waiting for me to do everything, not making excuses. It was as though she was trying to reclaim the part of herself she had lost when she married Dave. She began to understand slowly that true strength doesn't come from controlling others, but from understanding and respecting them. It was hard, though. Every day I was forced to confront the mother I had been and the mother I was becoming. The one who had poured her heart and soul into raising her daughter, and the one who now had to find the strength to forgive and rebuild. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by the memories of what had happened. Dawn packing my life into boxes, Dave's smug attitude, the feeling of being discarded like something worthless. But each day I grew stronger, and with each step forward, I could feel the distance between us closing. A few months later, something happened that I never expected. Dawn came to me one evening with a letter in her hands. I had been sitting by the window sipping my tea when she walked in, holding it out to me. "Mom," she said, her voice full of vulnerability, "I don't know how to make this right, but I need you to know how much I've changed. I found this in one of the old boxes, and I've been thinking about it ever since. I don't know what else to say, except that I'm sorry, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." She handed me the letter. It was from my husband, the one he had written just months before he passed away. I hadn't seen it in years. It had been one of the things I found when I went through the documents he left behind. I had never had the heart to read it until now. The letter was a reflection of everything my husband had believed in, the love he had for both of us and the hope he had for our future. He had written it to me, but in it he spoke about Dawn too. He talked about the challenges I would face when he was gone, how he knew I would be strong enough to face them. But he had also written about Dawn, how much he had believed in her, how he knew she would grow into someone capable of great things. The words struck me with such force that I felt tears well up in my eyes. My husband had always known me better than I knew myself. And more importantly, he had known Dawn. He had known that she would one day have to make her own choices, that she would one day have to learn the hard way, but he had never lost faith in her. I looked at Dawn, who was now standing by the window waiting for my response. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "for giving this to me. I needed to read it, more than you'll ever know." She came over and sat beside me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of the betrayal. For the first time, I felt like I was seeing the daughter I had raised, the one who had loved me unconditionally before the world changed her. "I'll never forgive myself for what I did to you, Mom," she said quietly. "But I will spend every day for the rest of my life making it right. And I know that's not enough, but it's all I can do." I nodded, slowly taking her hand in mine. "I know you will, Dawn. I see it in you. It's going to take time, but you'll get there. We'll get there. Together." And that was the beginning of something new between us. Dawn began to volunteer at the foundation I had started with the inheritance my husband had left. It had become a way to help other women who had gone through what I had, women who had been discarded, manipulated, and made to feel invisible. And as she worked there, helping those women reclaim their lives, I saw something in her that I hadn't seen before, a strength and compassion that were always there, but buried deep under the surface. It wasn't just the work she did for others that impressed me. It was the way she changed herself. She stopped seeking validation from people who didn't deserve it. She stopped letting others control her happiness. She began to see herself as worthy of respect, love, and dignity. And then came the most surprising news of all: Dawn was pregnant. It was a bittersweet moment filled with both joy and sadness. She was having a child of her own, someone who would carry on the family name, someone who would grow up surrounded by love, not manipulation. I was going to be a grandmother, and this time it felt like a new chapter in my life. When my granddaughter Serenity was born, it felt like the completion of a journey I hadn't even realized I was on. Dawn had grown into a woman I could be proud of, and I had learned that it was never too late to stand up for what was right. Years passed, and life settled into a rhythm. Dawn and I still had our disagreements, but they were no longer the things that tore us apart. They were small moments of tension, followed by conversations that healed and brought us closer. We were rebuilding not just our relationship, but the trust we had lost, and with it, our family. As I sat on the porch one evening, Serenity running around the garden, Dawn sitting beside me, I realized that everything I had been through had led me to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all brought me to the place where I could finally say with confidence that I had earned my peace. And I had learned the most important lesson of all: it's never too late to change your story. It's never too late to fight for your dignity, for your right to be heard, for the love and respect you deserve. Dawn and I together had found that out, and we were stronger for it. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on this journey of betrayal, redemption, and the power of second chances. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other.